From that day forward, weddings became painful reminders of the life he might have lived. He never blamed Murukeji. He blamed himself. I did not lose her because of lies, Baba Ade told Tosin. I lost her because I believed strangers before I believed the woman I loved. In the quiet town of Ilesa, where every celebration belonged to the whole community, weddings were more than ceremonies. They were festivals of music, laughter, colorful fabrics, and endless plates of jollof rice and pounded yam. There was one tradition, however, that puzzled everyone. At every wedding, no matter how rich or poor the family, an empty chair was placed near the front of the gathering. The chair was reserved for Baba Ade, yet Baba Ade never came. Children who grew up in the town accepted the custom without question, but visitors found it strange. Who has a receipt for a man who never attends? They would ask. The answer was always the same. Out of respect, no one explained further. Everyone knew Baba Ade. He was the finest tailor in the region. His hands had stitched wedding gowns that shimmered like morning light, and agbada so elegant that chiefs travelled from neighboring states just to wear them. Every bride trusted him, and every groom admired him. But after delivering the clothes, Baba Ade would smile politely, bless the couple, and disappear before the ceremony began. No one had ever convinced him to stay. No one except Tosin was willing to try. At 26, Tosin was preparing to marry the love of her life, Tunde. The entire town paused with excitement. When Baba Ade delivered her wedding dress, Tosin admired every careful stitch. "It is beautiful," she whispered. The old tailor nodded. "I hope it brings you joy." As he prepared to leave, Tosin stopped him. "You must come to the wedding." But he smiled gently. "I cannot. You haven't even heard the date." "It doesn't matter." She frowned. "But why?" The old man looked away and said, "I made the dress. My work is done." Then he walked away. Tosin stood in silence. Something in his eyes told her there was a story behind his refusal. The following afternoon, she visited his workshop. Baba Ade was measuring fabric when she came. He looked surprised. "You came." "I came because I have questions." He chuckled softly. "Young people always do." So she sat opposite him and said, "They say you never attended the wedding." "That is true." "They also say no one knows why." He continued walking. "Some stories are better when forgotten." There was a time when I loved weddings. More than 50 years earlier, Ade had been the happiest young man in Ilesa. He was handsome, ambitious, and already known for his skill with clothes. Every evening, he visited the village well, where a young woman named Mokeji fetched water. She had the brightest laugh in the town. Whenever she laughed, everyone nearby smiled without knowing why. They fell in love slowly. There was no grand speeches, no expensive gifts. There was just conversations beneath the trees, shared roasted corn at the market, and dreams of building a family together. When Ade finally proposed, Morukeji accepted without hesitation. Their parents approved. The wedding date was fixed. The entire town celebrated. Ade spent weeks sewing the finest wedding attire he had ever created. He believed nothing could separate them, but he was wrong. Not everyone admired their happiness. Among the townspeople lived a trader named Kunle. He had once hoped to marry Mokeji. After she refused him, jealousy settled deep inside his heart. A month before the wedding, Kunle spread a rumor. He claimed Mokeji had secretly promised herself to another man in Ibadan. He even paid someone to deliver a fake letter suggesting that she had planned to leave Ade after taking his money. The letter reached Ade. His heart broke. But instead of comforting Morukeji, he chose silence. Pride whispered louder than love. He thought, if she truly loved me, she would never betray me. So, without asking a single question, he cancelled the wedding. When Morukeji arrived at his workshop seeking answers, he refused to see her. She cried outside his door until sunset. He never opened it. Days later, humiliated and heartbroken, she left town with relatives. Years later, the truth emerged. Kunle confessed during a drunken argument. The letter had been fake. The rumors had all been lies. But by then, Nkechi was long gone. Ade searched for her. He traveled to villages across the state. He found nothing. The woman he loved had disappeared from his life forever. From that day forward, weddings became painful reminders of the life he might have lived. He never blamed Morukeji. He blamed himself. I did not lose her because of lies, Baba Ade told Tosin. I lost her because I believed strangers before I believed the woman I loved. Tosin's eyes filled with tears, and so he stopped attending weddings. I saw happiness for others because I failed to protect my own, he said. She looked around the workshop. The walls were covered with photographs of smiling couples. He had preserved everyone else's joy while refusing to share in it. That night, Tosin could not sleep. She kept thinking about the whole tailor sitting alone while generations celebrated around him. The next morning, she asked elderly women in the market about Morunkeji. Most shook their heads. One woman remembered hearing she had moved to Akure decades earlier. Another believed she lived near Hondo, but an old church elder finally provided a clue. He said, I heard her husband died some years ago. Do you know where she lives? The elder nodded slowly. I think I do. Against everyone's advice, Tosin traveled with her fiancé to a quiet town outside Akure. There, in a modest house surrounded by flowers, they met an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes. Her name was Morunkeji. When Tosin mentioned Baba Ade, the woman froze. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she invited them inside. The walls held faded photographs. Among them was one of a young man standing proudly beside a sewing machine. It was Ade. Mukeji had kept this picture for half a century. I never stopped wondering why he left me, she whispered. Tosin told her everything. The lies, the fake letter, the confession, the years of regret. Mukeji closed her eyes. Tears rolled down her cheeks. So much life wasted because two people chose silence. A week later, Tosin returned home. She visited Baba Ade once more. I found her, she said. The old tailor dropped the cloth in his hand. For a moment, he looked like the young man he had once been. Is she alive? Yes. She handed him a folded piece of paper. It was a letter. Inside were only a few lines. Dear Ade, time cannot return what we lost, but I've never hated you. If peace still exists for us, I would like to meet you one more time. Baba Ade read the letter again and again. For the first time in decades, he cried. Their meeting took place beneath a large iroko tree where they had once shared dreams. They simply talked about years gone by, about the foolishness of pride. When they parted, the bitterness that had followed them for decades finally disappeared. The day of Tosin's wedding arrived. Guests gathered beneath colorful canopies. Drummers played, children danced, families greeted one another with excitement. As always, an empty chair stood near the front. People glanced at it, expecting it to remain vacant. Then whispers spread through the crowd. He is coming. Heads turned. Walking slowly with the head of a carved wooden cane was Baba Ade. He wore a simple white agbada he had sewn for himself years earlier, but never worn. The entire gathering fell silent. Some elderly women wiped tears from their eyes. The whole tailor reached the chair. For a moment he stared at it. For decades it had represented regret. Now it represented healing. When he sat down, applause erupted across the building. Even the musicians paused to honor the moment. Tosin looked toward him before exchanging vows. The old man smiled. Not the polite smile he offered customers. A real one that reached his eyes. One born from peace. As the bride and groom promised to trust one another through every season of life, Baba Ade silently offered a prayer, not for wealth, not for success, but that they would never allow pride, gossip, or silence to destroy what love had built. Because he knew better than anyone that a single unanswered question could steal a lifetime. From that day forward, there was no longer an empty chair at weddings in Ilesa. There was simply a place where an old tailor sat quietly, watching young couples begin their journey, grateful that although the past could never be changed, the heart could still find forgiveness before the final stage of life was sown.